everyone, and welcome to this Kendall Hunt webinar, In the Box versus Out of the Box, What Great Communicators Know. Before we begin, I'll just go over some housekeeping points. This webinar will be recorded, and you will be receiving access in the coming days, as well as our presenters' contact information. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar in the chat and Q&A functions, and we will get to them as they arise. We'll also save time at the end for answering anything. So, now to introduce our speaker, Deirdre Simmons.
Hello, 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 and thank you, Bailey, for that introduction. Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well. In the chat, give me your name and where you're tuning in from, if you could, just so I can know who's in the room. And again, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I am Deirdre Simmons, certified coach, human resources executive, author, and yes, adjunct professor. However, I also need to let you all know that Dr. Angie Corbo could not be here today. She had a family emergency, so we're sending thoughts and prayers to Dr. Angie Corbo and lifting her up. Oh, yeah, I see in the chat. Hi, Cindy from Missouri. Kelly, you're in New Jersey. Doreen from Florida. Hi, Robin in Oklahoma. It is so glad to see you, or at least have you here in this space. Now, today, we are going to talk a little bit about communication in the box and out of the box, what great communicators know. I am thankful to Kendall Hunt for this particular webinar. I'll be sharing slides with you, and throughout, if you need to stop me and we have a little bit of dialogue, or you have questions for me in the chat, I'll try to address those as soon as I can. Bailey, I just want to make sure everybody's seeing the PowerPoint.
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see the thumbs up. Again, I've already introduced myself, and in Dr. Angie Corbo's absence, mentioned her in this space because she did work a little bit on this as well. So today's discussion, we're going to just talk a little bit because we don't have that much time together, but we want you to walk away with how can you improve student confidence in their online, which is in the box, and their in-person, out of the box delivery. How will we apply effective verbal and nonverbal communication techniques? And I want you to learn a few ways that students, as well as yourself, can connect with audiences. If we get to it, if we have a little bit of time, I also want to make sure you know how to approach communication and its importance for overall success, whether it's business or personal. So here are the highlights. We were coming into a pandemic in, was it 2020? Yes. So that was about 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago. And when you saw my introduction with the headscarf or the robe on, we know people showed up to virtual sessions in all sorts of ways. We had new ways of being. We couldn't work the new technology, or new to some of us. And it was, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you see me? Hopefully, we've gotten a little bit better, but there are some lingering effects from the pandemic. We'll talk about that. And then, how do we prepare students for success? This is a heavy lift, but what great communicators know is that we will shift, we find ways, and we make sure that the lessons that we give are not on the mute button for our students, that they can hear what's being said and really apply it to their lives. Some intentional talk around in the box and out of the box for a few key components, how I build my lesson, and hopefully you'll take away from that so you can build your lessons a little bit better, a little bit broader, so that they have more impact for your students. And then certainly at the end, I'll take questions. But as Bailey said, if you have a question, if you wanted me to stop at a certain point, certainly put it in the chat. Now, the impact of COVID. How can we talk about communications and public speaking without acknowledging that there are still lingering effects from COVID? During that time, students delayed graduation by 13%. Now, the Library of Medicine says that 55% of students who are low income were delayed graduates. There were 40% of students who had persistent feelings of hopelessness and sadness. Now, over the past few years, I've had the honor of teaching or impacting students on campus and in class, about 300 to 500 students. And I know that this is still occurring. There are still mental health issues that they're dealing with. There are family issues and financial issues. Again, but what great communicators know, what great public speakers know, and what I'm sure you as a professor, as a teacher, as a mentor know that all those obstacles can be overcome. We just sometimes have to light the way. And there's another percentage that I want you to be aware of. 55% of the people during COVID worked virtually. That was up from 14%. Now, currently, we're sitting at 32%. That's still a great number. A third of the workforce is working remotely. So, those skills that you teach around how to show up in a webinar, showing up 5 minutes early so that you know your technology is working, showing up properly dressed, showing up with lighting so that we can see your full face is important. And I'm finding that some students still don't understand that. It is reframing from multitasking, being present in the moment. And then I'll talk about some ways to help students do that, both in the box and out of the box. So, how do we prepare students for success? I want to pause right here. And Bailey, I'm going to ask that the participants put in the chat if you've ever heard someone say communication, public speaking is a soft skill. If you've seen it listed in job descriptions, if someone said that to you, put a 1 in the chat. Who's heard that public speaking is a soft skill? Cindy, Kelly, yes, soft skill. Now, do you believe that to be true? Julie, you've heard that it's a soft skill. A soft skill. So now what I want you to do is think back to the times that you've talked about public speaking and its impact or what it means to you. Have you referred to public speaking and or communication as a soft skill? Put a 2 in the chat. Yeah, we've all done it. I teach communications. I've literally written 2 books on communications, and I find myself saying soft skill, but I've shifted. And I hope after today you will shift too, because communication is used in whatever profession you're in whatever space you're in, whether it's with family, with friends, in the workplace. Communication, say it with me, is a necessary skill. So the next time someone says, oh, communication is a soft skill, it's a nice to have. No, it's necessary. And we need to have the foundation of public speaking, the foundation for communication, because it is truly a bridge to success. So, how do you prepare students to cross this bridge to success? Well, what great communicators know is that it is in the contextual learning. What is that? When you're in front of students, or even when you're in conversation, it's audience centered. How does this apply to their lives? How does this apply to the national landscape? What's going on nationally that what we're teaching applies and can help them be successful? It is the foundation for informative speaking and building credibility. It is providing your sources. It is showing up in a way that people can receive the information from you. That contextual learning is, what professions do they want to be in? What do they deem as success? And how does communication, good communication, public speaking, play a role in that? On the international landscape, because what we know to be true today is that to be successful, we need to build students who are aware of what's going on locally, nationally, but also internationally. How will they be able to have respectful discourse around those concepts and still bring people in who may differ from them, who may have different points of view and world views? This is what we do in public speaking, and this is how we prepare them for success. Now, you may have a great message, but if no one can understand you, it doesn't matter, right? What we find, at least I know that in the classroom, students come in with what I call a lazy tongue. They are so used to hanging with friends and not enunciating, or text messaging where they're not using full sentences and not allowing the words to form completely, that they drop off words, or you're not quite sure what they are talking about because they've yet to develop a full thought so that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. We talk about that in public speaking, but we also want them to enunciate. How do you do this? Well, I like to take a few exercises from acting. And one of those exercises is the lips, the teeth, the tip of the tongue, the tip of the tongue, the teeth, the lips. So exercises like that allow them to fully use the consonants and practice enunciation. We then can practice pacing with those same exercises, speeding it up and slowing it down. The lips, the teeth, the tip of the tongue, the tip of the tongue, the teeth, the lips. Those of you out there, have you done some of those exercises for yourself to warm your vocals, but also your jaw? Have you done it in the classroom? Put a Y for yes and an N for a not yet. Put that in the chat for me and let me see how many of you have engaged in some of those exercises. I, I particularly like whether the weather be cold or whether the weather be hot. We'll weather the weather, whether we like it or not. You'll find students dropping consonants. I have them do it in rounds, I have them do it in groups, and then as a whole, so that they can hear themselves. And we practice that. But how else do we prepare students for success? You have to set the stage. When they're coming in, is it a welcoming environment? Are you providing positive feedback? That's important. It has to be a space that they know that they can fail. And that's my next point. Failure is an opportunity. So many of us, professors included, and students, see failure as doom and gloom. But all failure is an opportunity. And you need to allow students to fail. Let them stand up and trip over words in an impromptu conversation or impromptu speech. Give them a topic and have them talk about it, but give constructive, relevant feedback so that they have tips and tools to change. It's not enough to say, improve your volume. You need to say, breathe from the diaphragm. Make sure you're connecting eye contact with the audience. And through the diaphragm, bring your volume up so that your audience can hear you. Look at the audience to see if they're understanding. And you layer in those lessons to prepare students for success. And speaking of layering in, provide variety. How many of you teach public speaking? Put public speaking in the chat if you teach public speaking. If you teach another form of communication, put that title in the chat for me. Okay? I see you, Robin. You teach completely online. Cindy, public speaking. Public speaking. Oh, and Julie, interpersonal communication. Okay, I see you. When you are teaching public speaking, even when it's online, it can still be personal. It is calling them by name. It is looking at the camera to simulate the eye contact, but is also saying to them, although it seems contrived and you may not be able to hold it for long, focus on the camera so that people feel that you're looking at them. And later on, I'll give you a few tips like that for both in the box and out of the box. But let me go back to variety. When I teach public speaking, yes, certainly, I teach informative speeches. You know, you have to have credibility. You have to have a journalistic integrity. I teach ethics, right? With informative speaking. What you say is important, and the sources that you have need to be credible. But in public speaking, so that there is variety, I also teach poetry. And poetry gives them the opportunity to understand rhythm and flow. I have them write poetry. This may open up a world of possibilities for them. Poetry can be therapeutic. It can help them work through issues. It might even be a good start for engaging the audience for their informative speeches. It's also about teaching social media. In this day and age, how can we teach public speaking without teaching the implications of social media, how to engage an audience, or discussing the online presence that you have and its impact on your life and your career? I'm going to pause and ask Bailey, are there questions that I need to lift up at this juncture or no?
I don't see any at the moment.
Okay, thank you. So let's go into it. I appreciate you, Bailey. Um, in the box versus out of the box. I noticed there's a couple of you that only teach online, and then there are others of you that teach out of the box, meaning in person, or as they say, IRL, in real life. What are the differences between verbal and nonverbal communication when you're in the box versus out of the box? Well, in the box, the verbal communication, you may have to pause and look at the chat. You may not give as much information as you would when you're in person because you can see the responses and the micro expressions of people to tell if they're understanding. When you're in the box, you have to purposely, just like I did there, pause, do the check-ins. Do you do that out of the box? Certainly, but it doesn't always have to be verbal. You can see through the audience's body language, or they may interject. When you're in the box, you need to learn how to use the raised hands and the chat function to engage, and also the verbal. When you're in the box, it takes a toll because you're talking and talking and talking. Remember to pause, take a breath, and either way, there is power in the pause. There's some environmental adjustments that you have to do. When you're in the box, the environment adjustment is, do you have the right lighting? Do you have the right volume turned up on the computer? Are you able to see the screen like you need it and the chat function? What do you need to do in the different types of platforms that are different in the box? How does Zoom differ from Teams, differs from Butter, differs from Google Meet? You need to understand those nuances and differences every time you're in the box. How do you teach that? Well, you have students go online. If you're not, I do a hybrid course so that we can do both. Let's practice. How are you showing up in the box? Can I hear you okay? Are you able to use the functions? And we walk through that. In the box, if you want small groups, you've got to put them into virtual rooms. Are you able to do that? And once your students graduate to being public speakers and teachers and keynote speakers and in all of their professions, project managers, etc., when they're running meetings, do they understand how to do that and facilitate that? Those are all the things that you have to do in the box. Now, the environment adjustment out of the box, and what we teach students is show up early to the room, understand the space. How will you interact with the audience based on the spacing? Is there a podium there? Be careful not to clutch the podium and hold on to it as if it is a crutch. How do you engage the audience and walk and not pace? Out of the box, you see your full self. So we talk about, how do you show up? How do you dress? That's important because that is a factor of credibility. How do you build rapport? I talked a little bit about this before. In the box, you need to call names. You need to do that eye contact with the camera. And you need to understand a little bit about the audience. Where are they coming in from? What's their focus? Begin to build rapport. I like to tell my students, it's not about you. It's about the audience. Be audience centered. And that's how you build rapport. Out of the box, if you indeed get there early, it's the small conversations. It's understanding who people are. And you can bring that up in conversation. You know, when I was talking to Kelly earlier, she mentioned that. And they now become a part of the presentation. And you build rapport, but you also build engagement. People like to hear their names. They like to know that you see them. There's a saying that we have in my church, it's sawubona. It means I see you. I see all of who you are. And people want to feel that. Yes, you're there. You need to prepare. You're the speaker, but it is about them. What information do they need that you're the vessel to provide? Have you tapped into what are they thinking? What are their questions? Again, pause. Do a check-in. How do you do that in the box? I've modeled that behavior. It's checking on the chat. It's calling by name. It's sometimes saying, hey, does anybody want to unmute? And let's talk about this. There's so much more that I could talk about, but time is getting away from us. So I do want to make sure that I give you part of the framework that I think about when I am building my classes. Every class, there's 13 to 14 classes in a semester. And all of my classes include some sort of lecture. What information do I want to highlight from their reading, from the prior class, from activities. What's the information that they need to know to be able to cross that bridge to success? And this is truly, you're the sage on the stage. You're giving information, you're the expert, but this should not be the bulk of what you're offering to them. There should be some somatic questioning. How are the students receiving this? How do they feel about it? What do they think about the information? What we know to be true is people learn when they hear stories and other people's stories, and when they're engaging with the information. This is the way you do that. Somatic questioning. Don't be so anxious to get to all of the frameworks and all of the models and every detail that you want them to have, because that will be information overload. Pause, take a breath, and understand when they talk through things that there's learning that is happening. I always make sure I want them to embody the information. What do I mean by that? I want them to move and shift. This is not a one-way communication model. It's the 4 ears model. It's my Simmons ecosystem model. There's a lot of things going on. There is the environment and their thoughts and their feelings, but I want them to get up and move. And sometimes that body activity is directly related to the lesson. For instance, when I talk about nonverbals, I do an acting exercise called Five Through the Door. How many of you have heard about Five Through the Door? You can put it in the chat, Five Through the Door. That is an acting exercise where you take one line from a movie. I take a line that either the students choose from their favorite movies or one of my own choosing or just a famous line. They all have to say that one line, but I have them get up, they get in lines, and then I give them an emotion to say it. So instead of doing the acting exercise five through the door, which means you do 5 emotions with that one line, because of time constraints, I give the student an emotion and they deliver that line with that emotion, whether it's glad, sad, love, happy. But I want them to understand congruency. If you're saying it verbally, I need to see it in your body and your facial expressions. Sometimes the embody just means they're up and moving and they're shifting. So I may have them circle up when we're discussing things. So they're standing versus sitting. And lastly, I always want to make sure that there's a connection, that there's impact. So, yes, that's incorporating the contextual learning, but it's digging deeper into who are they? How do they relate to this? How will they use it? And what are the consequences or the impact of this learning and using it successfully? That's my time today. I do have so much more that I wanted to talk about, but I'm glad you're here. I thank you. Remember, public speaking, communication is a necessary skill. We can all improve. Contextual learning is what you can do to make it live, and make sure you have some movement and that your students can put it in the body. Thank you all. I appreciate you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much for your great presentation today and your time. It looks like we do have a question here, and it is from an anonymous attendee. Her classes are fully online and is no live interaction between them and the student. I post lectures and have no way of knowing if the students are actually watching the lectures. I've kept my lectures to 20 minutes or less. Do you have any advice for this category of teaching public speaking? Appreciate your time. This is a conundrum for sure. Conundrum.
I love the conundrum. And I love the conundrum. And let me give you the background. During the pandemic, a lot of students told me I was the only professor that they ever met in person. During the pandemic, I'd had 3 to 4 classes that were in person. I built a screen, they deliver their speeches, and then the rest was virtual. After the pandemic, I flipped it. So I still do 3 to 4 either virtual classes or asynchronous classes, and then the rest are in person. This is how that applies to you. Depending on the technology you use, you can embed quizzes into that lecture and have it count towards their grade. So, how do you know that they're looking at that lecture? One, they're going to be graded on the information that you've given in that particular lecture. That's a quick way of knowing that they've watched it or not. There are LMS systems that can, if the way it's set up, I know at my university, the way it's set up, you can tell if they completed that particular part of the module. And the other way is, how are your assignments directly related to the information that you are giving in that lecture? For instance, have them upload a 1-minute talk on how they receive that information, or talk about a particular topic that you brought up and why it's important to them. What will that serve? You know that they have to interact with the information. You'll be able to assess their learning, and you'll be able to see their public speaking, their fluidity, how they can or not have a beginning, middle, and end. I hope that helps. There's another question. Um, Doreen, I see it. Bailey, I see it. Is it okay if I read it?
Yep.
Doreen is asking, how do I encourage students to engage more during the lecture? You ask questions, you have them discuss with neighbors, but you still have around 20% that cannot get off their phone or their laptop. I'll give you a few ways. And know, Doreen, that you will always have students that might be disengaged. What I know to be true is that it's not up to you to motivate students. It's up to you to be as engaging as you can, to present the information as best as you know how, and to be audience centered so that they can receive the information. In saying that, here are a couple of things that I do. I use Kahoot. I went to a friend's seminar a couple of years ago and discovered Kahoot, and I love it. I don't use it in every class. Probably about a third of my classes, I have a Kahoot. So now they have to be on the phone, but they're answering the questions and engaging with the information. Why are they engaged? Because they're competitive. They want to beat their fellow classmates, whether they say it or not. But I also let them know this will be a gauge on how well you can do on the midterm or the final or other assessments that I give you. This is a no fail environment. And I really get into it. I celebrate the ones on the podium. So if you've never done a Kahoot, they give one placeholders 1, 2, and 3, and it's all the bells and whistles. And I'm excited for them. An honorable mention to number 4 and 5. So engaging with the material. And I encourage them to engage with the lecture because I show up excited about the material. So, number one, using tools like Kahoot. Number two, how do I show up? Number three, and I didn't mention this in the formal kind of presentation, but I start all my classes with either meditation or breath work because I want them to be in a space of learning. So, how can we let go the stressors and the anxiety of the day? Or public speaking. It outshines death when it comes to fear. So, how can I get them closer to a space of, okay, I'm here, I'm present, and I'm engaged? It is lecture and then asking questions and calling names. People who haven't contributed. And I know there are two schools of thought. Some professors are like, oh no, Don't put students on the spot that causes them anxiety. We teach public speaking. Let's be clear. They're going to have anxiety anyway. So, if they can have that in an environment where it's okay to fail, it's okay that you're nervous. It's okay that you drew a blank. I do too. How are we going to work through that? And we talk about those ways. Doreen, does that have you? And I think you're at 80% engaged. Doreen, if you haven't heard it, you're doing a good job. Oh, lastly, how do I keep them engaged and off their phones? When they're up and moving and they have to circle up, it's hard to stand in a circle and talk to people while on your phone. Very difficult. My first 5 classes of public speaking, we stand up, circle up, and you have to give an introduction of who you are because that's the entryway into public speaking. That's networking. That is leading me up to when I teach them about their elevator pitch. It's real life necessary skills. And that's what good communicators know. When I really want to get creative, I have them circle up and they may have to answer a question, or I've shown a video. I show a video that's a really old video. It's often used in diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's the woman in Grand Central, and she is shopping. She is discombobulated, if you will, much like I was at the beginning of this. And she drops her packages, she misses her train, and then she goes and she doesn't really have a whole lot of money for a salad, but the guy gives her the salad anyway. She sits it down on a table, remembers that she left a bag, runs out, gets her bag. When she comes back to the table, there's a man sitting there eating the salad. And you see her, there's no sound in this. You see her nonverbals, and she is upset. This man is eating her salad. So she gets a fork and she puts it into the salad he's eating. And then what happens is it fast forwards through and it shows how her salad was at another table and she was mistaken and she was eating the man's salad, but she thought he had stolen her salad. I talk about how are we judging people? How does that impact how we communicate with them? And after we did that or looked at that particular video, I had them circle up and I had a few prompt questions. They answered the prompt question. And when we moved to the next person, we moved around the circle physically. You move one step to the right, and now the next person goes. This gets their body moving. They're more engaged. They have to be. Other questions or concerns?
I do have a question. You mentioned that you're an author of 2 books. Do you have a favorite part of either of those?
Oh, thank you for that question. Now, I have not given birth to biological children, but you are right, Bailey. I've given birth to 2 books. My favorite about, and I'll talk about this one because this is not the one that I'm here today and why Bailey's here. Clear Communication, Powerful Results. I use that book in my professional communications class. And my favorite part about it is when I teach the 3 brain theory and the Enneagram. And if you have not heard of the Enneagram, and I got a sponsor and had my students take the Enneagram test. It's that personality type testing, but it says, who are you? How do you show up? How do you communicate with others when you're at your best and when you are, let's not say your worst, but when there are other parts of you that show up? What does that sound like? What does that look like? And how do you engage in a team, whether it be in college or at work? So that's my favorite part of that particular book, that and the AI portion. So Public Speaking, A Bridge to Success is my public speaking text. And my favorite part about it, and I think this goes for anyone that's a professor or a teacher, the new version, the second edition, makes the lift easier for professors. And how do I mean that? It's an easy lift because there are exercises throughout, there are quizzes throughout. It reduces the professor's workload. If you're like, I can't think of an activity do for this, that's okay to do for this. It's okay. There's one it's an online text. It's an e-textbook. There's one in the e-textbook. I love that. Bailey, do you mind if I give two more?
No, no problem.
Okay. So public speaking, a bridge to success it's a framework for what everyone needs to know in the greater society. So, public speaking is just the framework for how do you engage in social justice? How do you engage in ethics? How do you engage in ethical persuasion? And I'm really proud of that. I've brought in examples from key leaders and speeches that they've given who are some pretty well-known names. And in that context of public speaking, what can the students learn from that? And why is it important to be a global citizen now? And I think the last thing is because although no public speaking text will give you everything that you need, I think I've been pretty comprehensive in this. And it's everything from informative speaking and persuasion to ethics and artificial intelligence. Professors can choose what they want to present to students. You won't have to do everything. You have it there if you need it, and you can shift based on the level of students that you have and the pacing of the course. How was that?
Thank you.
I'd like to hear from participants. You can put it in the chat. Is there one thing in particular that stood out to you from this? And it was a very quick talk. You know, this could have been a 7-part series, right? So a very quick talk, a very high level conversation about communication and public speaking. Is there anything that stood out to you? Let me see what's in the chat. Or Bailey, you do this for a living, right? Is there anything that you're like, oh my, okay, that's interesting, or it stood out, or maybe it was something you knew, but it just ignited that memory again?
I like your classroom examples that you've mentioned, like the five through the door. I haven't heard of that one, and I can picture myself back in class when I took the college courses. Um, that would have been nice to use in class.
Did you have group projects in college?
Yes, yeah, but I majored in marketing, so they weren't really communication focused.
Okay.
They would just kind of put us in groups and tell you to get to work.
Wow. So the good thing is when you learn about the Enneagram, it tells you how can you best work in a group. But there's another acting exercise that I do. It's called yes and. Yes, and. And of course, I have them circle up again. And someone has to start a story. It needs to be positive and uplifting, but you have to listen to the person before you and build on that story. So I may start with Bailey. We talk about the marketing genius of Nike. And then Bailey may say, yes, and they've done a great job with focusing on women's sports as well. And the next person has to say yes, and you build on it. Why is that important? Listening skills. Listening, although I couldn't get to it today, is a key component of public speaking, as well as teamwork, paying attention to the person next to you and building on what they've said. This works in public speaking. It works for group projects. Some of your students maybe want to be newscasters and they have to say, and now I'll throw it over to Bailey, right?
Right. Thank you. Right. Robin says, I appreciate the emphasis you place on public speaking as a necessary part of your everyday life.
Thank you. And although it is a focus on public speaking is still the nonverbals. It's still the communication. So if you try to go a day without speaking, you still have to communicate nonverbally, right? You still have to make sure that message is clear and that the messages that you're sending are received by the audience. And that's really the goal of it. You are either trying to inform, persuade, or entertain. How successful are you going to be at that? And if you are truly successful and you have those tools, you'll be able to cross the bridge to success. You'll be able to be a successful business person, project manager. Have you been to the doctor and they don't communicate very well and they don't have good bedside manner? That's public speaking. It's everywhere.
For sure. Without a doubt.
I see a question from Deborah. How do you define public speaking as opposed to interpersonal communication? And how do you feel about public speaking online? Okay, Deborah, that's layered. How do I define public speaking? Public speaking is communication that is released verbally, but still attached to, and the success depends upon listening, nonverbals, credibility, and ethics. Oh, Deborah, you put me on the spot. But I think I like that definition of public speaking. It is those things that occur in the public square. And it is not confined by verbal. It can be your social media posts. It can be your written communication. So for me, anything that will be seen by both the intentional and unintentional audience that has left your heart and your head, that's public speaking. Interpersonal communication, and I have someone on here that teaches interpersonal communication. I don't know if that was you, Deborah, or someone else. Chime in if you have something else. But for me, interpersonal communication touches on how do I, my fears, my ways of being, show up, connect, collaborate, and interact with someone else's ways of being, upbringing, worldview, etc. Now, do I talk about that in public speaking? Yes, because I think you need to have that in public speaking. Am I a interpersonal communication expert? By no means necessary. By no means. And I say that because I recognize my strengths and I recognize where I have room for growth. I'm very clear on that. People frustrate me. They do. And sometimes I just don't have the bandwidth or the energy to go into that interpersonal connection like someone really should so that it is successful. Again, we all need that in the workplace, in our marriages, with our friends and family. For me, there are more things that can go wrong with interpersonal communication. And how do I feel about public speaking online? I believe we need to have lessons around public speaking online, that in the box and the out of the box. How do you show up to a Zoom or a Google Meet? How do you not overtalk someone who's in the group? How do you use that yes and? How do you build on what someone said when they're in the box? However, for me, there's a big difference when you have to show up to a space confront people in person, it is different in the body. The body responds and reacts differently. And the online presence, although different and necessary, does not take the place of the full in person public speaking um, experience. That's a great question, by the way. I've had students who want to say, oh, I can't make it to the informative speech or the persuasive speech. Can I just do it for you online? Well, absolutely not, because your counterparts had to put on a suit, show up, maybe fight traffic, deal with anxiety in the space, deal with podium and notes and interacting with the audience and a full audience versus being online with one person. Not quite fair. I see the follow up from Deborah. Did you want to read that or you want me to, Bailey?
Yeah, I can follow up.
Okay.
Um, she says, yes, thank you. I teach both public speaking and interpersonal communication classes. We have both online sections. She agrees, and she mentioned they have to require students to compile an audience of at least 5 people and submit the recording of the speech.
I like that. That's a good way to pivot. And again, what great communicators know is that regardless of the pandemic, regardless of the obstacles, we find ways to pivot so that they get those necessary skills. And that's why I know I do the work. I know that I've been sitting at weddings and you know the toast, you know that toast that is either so bad that it's cringeworthy or so boring that you're just praying that they stop or you use the opportunity to take a bathroom break. So we talk about how do you give a toast? Or if you are, accepting the Country Music Award or the Lifetime Achievement Award, what does your acceptance speech sound like? And can you build that so that it is succinct, it is engaging, and it is paying homage. Did I say that right? Homage. See, even public speakers get it wrong every now and then. Uh, to the occasion. And I guess as a professor, showing a little vulnerability is okay too. Questions, concerns, anything that I touched on that you are like, okay, lady, what are you talking about? Or certainly more of that, please. So if Kendall Hunt wants to do a second webinar, what should we focus on? What do you need to do? What do you need to understand for greater success in your roles? And if you don't have that now, it's something to ponder. Well, let me say thank you to Ross and Robin and Mary and Doris and Donna and Deborah and the whole host of 20 or more people that had to drop a few moments ago. But thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sawabona, I see you. Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you everyone for attending. And as a reminder, you will be sent a recording of this webinar in the coming days. So, thank you all.
And Kendall Hunt and Bailey, most certainly Bailey, thank you.
Of course. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye bye.